There is a strange economic contradiction that a lot of people can feel, even if they do not know exactly how to explain it. Wages have gone up. A lot of workers are earning more than they were a few years ago. Some people have received raises, others switched jobs and pushed their income higher. On paper, the numbers look better, and yet, at the exact same time, a huge number of people still feel like they are falling behind. They do not feel more comfortable. They do not feel more secure. They do not feel like they have made real financial progress. In many cases, they feel the opposite. They feel poorer. That sounds like it should not make sense. If your paycheck is bigger, life should be getting easier. If your income rises, you should have more breathing room. You should be able to save more, stress less, and feel at least a little more in control. But for a lot of people, that is not what happened. And that gap between what should feel true and what actually feels true is where this whole story begins. Because this is not just about emotions, and it is not simply a case of people being dramatic about prices. It points to something deeper about the way modern life works, the way expenses behave, and the way financial pressure is experienced in the real world. So, what is actually going on? Why do so many people feel poorer even when their wages are rising? To understand that, we have to start with a very important distinction. There is a difference between earning more money and actually feeling like your life costs less to maintain. Those are not the same thing. A raise can mean progress, but a raise can also mean you are just running faster to keep up with a more expensive version of normal life. And that is the part people often miss. If your income goes up, but nearly all of that extra money gets absorbed by rent, groceries, insurance, utilities, transportation, debt payments, childcare, and all the other recurring costs of daily life, then technically, you are making more money. But in practical terms, your life may not feel better at all. You are not using that extra income to build wealth. You are not using it to meaningfully upgrade your lifestyle. You are not using it to create a bigger safety cushion. You are using it to stop yourself from sliding backward. And psychologically, that feels very different. Someone who gets a raise and uses it to build savings, invest more, take pressure off their monthly budget, or finally get ahead of debt will feel like they are moving forward. But someone whose raise instantly disappears into higher housing costs, more expensive food, rising bills, and a dozen other financial drains is not going to feel richer. They are going to feel stuck. That is the first big reason so many people feel poorer. The question is not simply whether wages are rising. The question is where that extra money actually goes. And once you start looking at that, things get a lot less comforting. Because one of the biggest misunderstandings in everyday economics is the way people interpret the phrase, inflation is coming down. When most people hear that, they instinctively imagine relief. They hear it and think
This
prices
significant
must
slowdown
finally
in the
be
inflation
calming down
rate
in a way they
suggests
can
that the
actually
economy
feel.
is stabilizing,
Maybe not dropping,
defying earlier
but at least
predictions of a
becoming manageable
recession.
again. But that is not how this works. When inflation cools, it does not mean prices go back to where they used to be. It just means prices are rising more slowly than before. That sounds like a technical detail, but it changes everything. Because if the cost of basic life jumped aggressively over the last few years, and now those costs are only rising a little more slowly, people are still living on top of a much higher cost structure than they were before. And that is where the disconnect comes from. On paper, the rate of increase may be improving, but in real life, the higher price level is still there. The grocery bill is still elevated, the rent is still elevated, insurance is still elevated, eating out is still elevated, services are still elevated, repairs are still elevated. So when people hear that inflation is easing, but their monthly budget still feels painfully tight, it can sound like somebody is describing a different economy than the one they actually live in, and to them, that feels dishonest. The chart may look better, but the bills are still real, and that leads to another crucial point. Not all price increases feel the same. If luxury goods become more expensive, that matters, but it usually does not create the same kind of emotional pressure as rising essential costs. A high-end gadget getting more expensive is annoying. A vacation costing more is disappointing. A premium upgrade becoming harder to justify is frustrating. But those things are optional. Crushes people is when the expensive stuff is the stuff they cannot avoid. Housing, food, insurance, medical expenses, transportation, utilities, internet, childcare, school costs, basic household services. These are not luxury categories. These are the price tags attached to ordinary life. And when the cost of ordinary life keeps rising, A raise does not feel like extra money. It feels like defensive money. It feels like money that arrives already spoken for. And that is a miserable feeling because it means your paycheck is not expanding your world. It is just protecting you from a more expensive version of the same world. That is why so many people can honestly say they are making more than before and still feel like they are struggling more than before. They are not imagining it. They are experiencing a shift in the baseline cost of staying afloat. And once essentials start swallowing more of your income, the rest of your financial life becomes harder in ways that are not always immediately visible. Saving gets harder, investing gets harder, paying down debt gets harder, planning ahead gets harder. Even small setbacks become more dangerous. A car repair matters more, a medical bill matters more, an unexpected fee matters more, a bad month matters more, because the margin for error gets thinner. And when your margin for error gets thinner, you start feeling poorer even if your income technically went up. But there is another layer to this story, and it is one of the most underrated financial changes of the modern economy. A lot of life today is no longer built around one-time purchases. It is built around recurring payments. That shift matters more than people realize. There was a time when many expenses were simple. You bought something once, owned it, and that was mostly the end of the transaction. Now, more and more parts of life are packaged as subscriptions, monthly fees, service plans, auto renewals, platform charges, access costs, or maintenance costs. Each one by itself may seem small, not terrifying, not dramatic, not enough to trigger alarm. And that is exactly why they are so effective at draining people slowly. A $10 charge does not feel like a crisis. A $15 charge does not feel like a crisis. A $20 charge does not feel like a crisis. But stack enough of them together and your monthly cash flow starts getting eaten alive by things that individually seemed harmless. And the worst part is that many of these costs no longer feel optional. You need internet, you need cloud storage, you need certain apps, you need software, you need account access, you need delivery convenience, you need digital tools for work, school, communication, and administration. So modern life creates this weird financial experience where people do not feel extravagant at all, but their monthly outflows still keep growing. They are not necessarily buying more physical stuff. They are paying more to maintain access to normal existence. And that is a very different type of pressure than the old model of spending. It is slower, more invisible, and harder to emotionally track. That makes people feel poorer too. Because when money leaks out of your account in dozens of recurring little ways, it rarely feels like one dramatic financial mistake. It just feels like life itself has become expensive. And then, there is the problem with averages. Averages are useful for headlines. They are useful for charts. They are useful for broad economic narratives. But no one actually lives inside the average. People live inside their own bills. That matters because wage growth is not evenly distributed. Some people got strong raises. Some people changed jobs at the perfect time. Some industries had more leverage than others. Some workers were positioned to negotiate. Some were not. So even if average wage growth looks decent, that does not mean every worker actually experienced it in a way that changed their life. Meanwhile, rising costs spread with incredible efficiency. Your rent does not care whether your industry had strong wage growth. Your grocery bill does not care whether your employer offered a meaningful raise. Your car insurance does not care whether your bonus got cut. Your utility company does not care whether your hours were reduced. That is why broad economic averages often fail to capture lived experience, because people do not compare their life to a national average. They compare their life to their own bank account, their own paycheck, and their own monthly obligations. So, if the official story says wages are rising, but your particular life still feels tighter, then your personal conclusion is going to be simple. Something is not working. And from your point of view, that conclusion is rational. Because financial well-being is not just about income. It is about the relationship between income, fixed costs, recurring obligations, risk, and your ability to create breathing room. And that breathing room is what a lot of people feel they have lost. This may actually be the biggest issue of all. For many people, feeling richer is not about buying luxury goods. It is not about looking wealthy. It is not even about spending more. It is about feeling like the future is a little more stable. Can you build an emergency fund? Can you reduce debt? Can you handle a surprise expense? Can you afford to move? Can you survive a disruption? Can you imagine buying a home? Can you picture retirement without panic? Can you support children without feeling financially cornered? If the answer to those questions keeps getting weaker, then people are not going to feel like they are getting ahead, even if their salary number is technically higher. That is because many people do not measure financial progress by whether they survived this month. They measure it by whether they are building resilience for the next 5 years. And if they are not, they feel fragile. And fragility feels a lot like poverty, even before it becomes true poverty in the strictest sense. That is why two people can get a similar raise and walk away with completely different emotional outcomes. One person may have stable housing, lower debt, fewer dependents, lower medical risk, and fewer fixed monthly obligations. For them, the extra income might feel meaningful. Another person might be dealing with high rent, childcare, debt payments, expensive insurance, an aging car, family responsibilities, and a dozen recurring digital costs layered on top. For them, the raise may vanish almost instantly. So, yes, wages can rise, and yes, people can still feel poorer because income growth alone does not determine whether life feels secure. Security depends on what your costs are doing, how predictable your future feels, and whether your money is actually creating room to breathe. And for a lot of people, it is not. It is just patching holes. It is just covering increases. It is just helping them maintain a standard of life that has quietly become much more expensive than it used to be. That is why this issue hits so hard psychologically. People are not only reacting to prices, they are reacting to the loss of control. They are reacting to the realization that doing the responsible thing does not seem to create the same rewards it once did. Work hard, earn more, stay disciplined, try to budget, try to avoid obvious mistakes, and still, somehow, the sense of progress feels weak. That is not just frustrating, it is disorienting because it makes people question whether the old financial logic still works the way they were taught it should. And maybe that is the real story here. Maybe the reason so many people feel poorer even when wages are rising is not simply that prices went up. Maybe it is that the entire experience of modern financial life has changed. Costs are stickier, essentials are heavier, recurring payments are everywhere, raises get absorbed faster, and the gap between earning more and feeling safer has grown wider. So when someone says, I make more money than I used to, but I still feel poorer, that is not necessarily a contradiction. It may actually be a very accurate description of what life feels like in an economy where a bigger paycheck no longer automatically translates into a bigger sense of stability. And until that changes, a lot of people are going to keep having the same unsettling experience. They are earning more, but they do not feel better off. Not because they are irrational, not because they are bad with money, and not because they are failing to notice their own wage growth, but because more and more of that growth is being used to defend an increasingly expensive baseline of ordinary life. And when your raise is not helping you move forward, but only helping you hold your ground, it makes perfect sense that many people would come to the same conclusion. They are not really feeling richer at all, they are just paying more to stay in place.